Welcome to Design Show 2021. We're thrilled to have both of you here, Lindsay and Kathleen. Your collection is titled Underrepresented and Overlooked. Tell us a little bit about the pieces you selected.
I'll let you take that.
Okay, I took some notes because I expected this question. So to me, I can only speak in my personal account, but to me, the theme of underrepresented and overlooked was an overarching theme based on a lot of our what drew us to the work, and a lot of overlap to what drew us to the work. And to me, it was kind of a combination of things. It was a broad enough topic that it could encompass a few different ideas and themes. You could look at underrepresented and overlooked by just the nature of the client and what the work was. Were there pieces that don't normally get granted design awards because they're not seen as like particularly sexy, clients or prompts? By who did the work, which was often, sometimes included in a lot of descriptions, or I think Kathleen and I also, might have done, some research and things like that, based just to kind of get a little bit more of a sense of where the work was coming from or what have you. It could be the materials used. For example, the Adidas Parlay piece was, using materials that are normally, trash, recyclable, things like that, overlooked. It could be the narrative of the piece. I think something like the Lighthouse Mouse, both to me had, first of all, it being for the I believe it's the Minnesota State Lottery, not exactly the design powerhouse that we think, normally. And then also just the narrative of the character development and this kind of, very small presence making a very large impact, that sort of thing. And then, well, I guess this sort of goes back to the nature of the client, but also, who are you doing the work for? Is it for a large brand? Is it for a brand that has a bunch of resources, or that has, already existing, very visually, aesthetically pleasing images or imagery or content? Or is it, a harder prompt because it's a smaller budget or a smaller business that you're working for, or a family-owned business, a local business, things like that. So those were all the things to me that kind of factored into some of the decision making, and particularly what I used as a guidepost to bring it down from a sort of first edit to then a very selective second edit down.
Right. Fantastic. Kathleen, what are your thoughts on some of the favorite pieces that you had in the collection?
Yeah. First of all, Lindsay, thank you. That was very comprehensive. So I think kind of echoing what Lindsay is saying, and when we were thinking about the concept of themes, I think that, our thought was we felt like the judges would probably find very similar themes, because the themes of a lot of the artwork kind of echo the themes of the last 2 years, just outside of art and design, and kind of into just the general zeitgeist of what everyone is talking about, what everyone is experiencing. And we're just seeing the artwork that's kind of coming to fruition during these times. There were some pieces that, I was really drawn to kind of the commentary that it feels very just important right now. And I think that, I'm sure, which was a favorite amongst other judges, was the Stop Killing Black People project, and kind of any sort of project that touches on, I think, important topics that are happening today. I think those are really hard to ignore and need to be acknowledged. Anything that we felt like was bringing attention to a great cause, or just adding some commentary or bringing some background to what we're all kind of experiencing. And then especially if there was a lot of philanthropic ties to it, or if there was real impact and change being made with these projects. And obviously with the description in that piece, they had been handing them out on the ground at protests. They had raised money. Minneapolis was that was the city that kind of sparked this entire international global conversation. So that piece in particularly was extremely impactful. And we both, agreed, and I'm sure I saw it in other people's collections. It was just important, and we can't ignore pieces like that. And then, like as Lindsay was saying, there's pieces that we didn't want to get overlooked as well, because they may have not been touching on something that affects everyone, but it could just be a solution that is kind of speaking to a group that may be underrepresented, or even with we picked a senior care logo because although that was a very, compared to some of the other submissions, less flashy, we'll say, that was a really simple design solution to a organization that is caring for seniors. So I don't want to forget about those types of projects, because depending on the scale and how it ends up existing, doesn't necessarily always have to be the thing that everyone's looking at, and wanted to make sure we were kind of taking a look across the board. But yeah, there were times, in our whole top 15 or 12, whatever we ended up, it was really hard to narrow down, because there was some really good work there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, so I'm curious, how do you think your own design experience, the work that you've done, the books of work that you've built, how did that play into the pieces that you saw and the selections that you were making?
I want me to go again.
Go for it.
So my background is in publication design, and particularly magazine titles. And for the past decade or so, exclusively, maybe about 12 years, I've worked mainly in editorial design and in political magazines. Most recently, the New Republic. Prior to that, the Baffler, which was a sort of smaller publication, Newsweek, Foreign Policy magazine, the New York Times magazine, things like that. So I personally feel more, I think, clued into the media industry than the design industry per se. That's my own sort of personal bias. I do teach at Maryland Institute College of Art, and luckily those students help me keep me on my toes and let me know what's cool, and all the stuff that I don't keep up with, because I'm so kind of clued into sort of the political atmosphere and the political media atmosphere in particular. Yeah. So I think that preference definitely, that's definitely my own perspective and interests and sort of biases and things like that. There's certain aesthetic biases as well. I'm actually more in tune to things that are the more I spend the more time I spend on the computer, and the more time I see these, very easy, kind of put together templates and things like that, the more I actually appreciate more tactile approaches often. But I would never also consider myself, say, like an activist, even if I'm interested in, you know, where the intersection of design and politics and activism is. Maybe my contribution is, you know, art directing covers or, you know, commissioning editorial illustrations that are supposed to be powerful and gripping and as, you know, serious or as engaging as the journalism that it supports.
Right.
But I'm not, you know, the limited canvassing or things that I have done, I don't do it as in the capacity of a designer. So I very much think that I struggle with the sort of design industry's impulse to make a lot of socially conscious work an opportunity for self-promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the real organizers are doing organizing, and it's not, a design is necessary, but it's not really a substitution to, I think, you know, actual grassroots groundwork and things like that. So as much as I probably come from a bias that I am sort of naturally attracted towards work that is more, you know, promoting social justice and all, you know, a lot of socially conscious work. I am, you know, personally sort of finding it a bit sort of ethically or morally difficult to kind of straddle those lines and trying to tease out what feels like self-expression versus what feels like something that's actually helpful to a cause. And I think to what Kathleen said, particularly about the Stop Killing Black People campaign, is it, you know, it raised money for groups that were on the ground. And, you know, I don't necessarily think communities or grassroots or movement building involves branding per se. And I think a lot of designers kind of turn it into a branding project, which I think is just their nature to be sort of top down and very sort of corporate first in a way, when not everything needs to be branded, you know. But there was something that was particularly honest and authentic about that that particular project. Aesthetically, it was very beautiful. I love typography. I love black and white. I love hand-done typography. It was, you know, very memorable, and, you know, and it had an authenticity in terms of where it was, the nature of, as Kathleen said, the nature of where it was, where it happened, in the epicenter of everything, and, you know, the change in the actual material impact that it made.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Kathleen, I'm wondering, are there any particular types of you know, trends or styles that you were seeing come out of the work that you found interesting or relevant, or, you know, or anything that you know, wished you'd been able to see more of even?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the trends, like it was mainly from like how people were approaching things and like the topics, you know, like we were saying, there was a lot of things that hit on the things that everyone was dealing with over the last year and a half, almost 2 years, of like having to find different solutions, you know, in terms of communication and how people are collaborating. There were a lot of things that were touching on isolation and like stillness. So like, you know, staying at home and all of that stuff, as well as representation across different marginalized groups, you know, from package design in terms of like how, like who the client was, what the product was. You know, there's 2 pieces that we had put in our top list. There was Ta, which I believe it's Ta, and which is tea in Chinese. There was that product in which they were branding a Chinese tea in a can. And then there was the sandwich company in which they were helping rebrand a local Vietnamese sandwich shop, which is also very on theme with what's happening here in New York and other like metropolitan cities that have a lot of like Asian owned businesses that have just need a little bit of extra help in terms of creating design that is helping attract a newer audience and or helping them digitize, get on seamless, all of that. So I think that those were the types of projects that I was really drawn to. Things that were kind of like reacting and helpful, using design as an aspect to kind of help raise awareness, and just bring attention to a marginalized group. My background is in magazines as well, but more so from a storytelling aspect. So I was really drawn to the projects that had a really strong storytelling aspect. The ones that had a lot of explanation behind like why they did XYZ, what was the solution in which they were helping for, and it kind of goes beyond like those types of projects. Like even with it was the American Geophysical Centennial graphic. That's like not typically something in which I would be coming across in my line of work or creating in my line of work. But I think when you kind of really like expand in on what was created there, it was really great to see all of the kind of storytelling that happened, I think it was 100 years of innovation that was being represented in one graphic, and kind of the design, like the illustration and design solutions in which they used to like kind of tell those stories throughout just one piece. So I would say those are the types of projects that I was leaning towards. And from a trend perspective was also kind of seeing like what we spoke about in terms of like our larger themes was mainly just kind of subject matter. There were some, design trends that we saw, like, that me and Lindsay felt were like trendy. We felt like the ones that were super successful and like how that those trends were interpreted and kind of spin. So it felt like it was their own, those made it into our top 15. But, I think that there wasn't really anything I felt like it was missing, because I did feel like across the board, there were tons of submissions. We kind of saw a little bit of everything.
Love it. Love it. Anything that you saw in this that you think will impact your own work over the next year or two?
I'd personally love to design a board game if I could. If somebody asked me to design a board game, I would absolutely love to design a board game.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It just
Whoever's out there, Hasbro, give us a call.
I have absolutely no background in it, but trust me, I'll find a way.
It'll be gorgeous.
Yeah, that and milk packaging. I really want to redesign. I thought there were two. I think the carbon negative was both sort of general. It was both ice cream and milk, and then the 10 Fins Creamery.
Right.
I really loved the sort of reduction and reinvention of just simple milk packaging with those, and the fact that this is getting off topic to what you asked, but to also talk about what Kathleen mentioned, I really do appreciate as well that now it seems that the trend in design, judging design competitions, is that designers or design studios or firms now do feel like it's imperative and important to bring context and a narrative to their work, and not just, send the submissions and say, here's what I did, it was fun, client loved it, that sort of thing, but actually tell us the nature of who they were, what they who they are. Are they an ethical company or not? You know, and where sort of they're coming from, and that kind of impact. So I think that's a very positive trend that seems to be happening.
I love it. I love it. Kathleen, any final thoughts for our members and attendees tonight?
No, I think what what Lindsay was saying was great, and I think that similar, like, a takeaway was, and it was something me and Lindsay both talked about, was especially if it was a physical item, like the idea of waste. And there are some projects that we really love, but we thought, is this creating waste in the planet? And sometimes the answer was yes. It was beautiful, but if it was something that could be thrown away, then it didn't feel ethical. So I think that maybe that's like a good place to end things on for me, which is just, I think that, as Lindsay was saying, it's hard to remove the ethics and, like, the purpose behind design work these days. And that really kind of drove a lot of our decisions. Yeah, that's it.
That's perfect. Lindsay, Kathleen, thank you both so very much for all of your hard work on behalf of AIGA Minnesota and Design Show 2021. Really appreciate it. Like everyone else, it's been different this year, and you all really stepped up. And so I very much appreciate it. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Congrats
Cheers.
to the winners.